You look at Poland today, you look at Hungary today. Could we even call those democracies in today's environment?
I actually don't like the idea that what's happening in Eastern Europe is that different from what's happening in Western Europe. I mean, some of the argumentation that people make and so on is different, but it's more similar than you think. In Poland and Hungary, you have autocratic, authoritarian, populist political parties that have made arguments about, again, not so much about economic loss, because the story of Poland since 1989 is one of unbelievable success. I mean, Poland never had a recession, and yet there was a feeling of some that they were that they had lost something, or that something traditional about Poland was disappearing, or that demographic change, which in this case meant people emigrating rather than people immigrating, that young people were leaving. My town isn't the same kind of place that it used to be. This created a sense of discontent. But I still think that the biggest difference between Poland and Hungary on the one hand, and say the kinds of authoritarian populist parties you find in Germany, France, Austria, and Italy, is simply one of scale. I mean, they've won elections in Poland and Hungary. They haven't won them yet in Italy or Austria, but they might. And if they did, we might find the trajectory was quite similar. So again, in Eastern Europe, you can certainly point to countries where you do have a sense of something being missing. But I think it's a broader problem. I mean, actually, this will sound very bizarre, but the trajectory of events and the nature of political debate in Poland is amazingly similar in a lot of ways to the United States. The kinds of arguments that people make, the level of polarization. And you can see this impulse to destroy and undermine the institutions of democracy everywhere, and you can see a certain amount of popular support for it. And that, to me, means that we must be talking about a phenomenon that has a broader base. It's not just the U.S. and its, racist or Civil War legacy, and in Poland, it's not just communism and the legacy of authoritarianism. There are other things going on that we all have in common that is causing that's causing this phenomenon.
I mean, you do sound more structurally negative about the trajectory that Europe is on. Do you think that Europe is on a trajectory towards failure?
So I actually believe that pessimism and formal pessimism is irresponsible. I don't think someone like you or me is really in a position to tell lots of younger people that Europe is on a downward trajectory, or Western civilization is in decline, or American democracy is finished, because that's not really how history works. History is radically open, and many trajectories are still available to us depending on what people say. And there are ways, actually, in which Europe is in some ways is in a better position than the United States. For example, I genuinely believe that democracies reinforce one another, and that being part of tight relationships with other democracies and being forced to negotiate things together and watching closely what one another does solidifies democracy at home. And there's an example of that. For many, many years, we always thought of the United States and its involvement in the transatlantic alliance as being this kind of act of American generosity. We support democracy around the world. We support it in Europe and so on. In retrospect, looking back now over the Cold War, with some advantage of time, it's pretty clear that America's involvement in its sense of itself as the leader of the West, or rather the leader of the democratic world, also solidified democracy at home. It created this kind of civic religion around democracy, that it's something we need to protect. This is what our foreign policy is based on. This is who we are. This is our identity as a nation. This is what we're projecting around the world. That was really important for keeping Americans together and blocking the spread of this kind of the politics of identity in the United States. That what matters is not that I'm American and I share this set of values, but that I'm a white American or I'm a black American, and therefore I have a different set of views. So the alliances of democracies, these international organizations that do still function in Europe, I think will help Europeans over the long term, even when they seem to stumble a lot from day to day.